The house was quiet. Too quiet. 12-year-old Sarah sat cross-legged on the living room floor, flipping through channels. Her parents had gone to a Christmas party in the city, leaving her home alone for the night. She'd been excited at first. What kid wouldn't want the house to themselves? But as the night crept in, a strange uneasiness settled over her. It wasn't just the stillness of the house. It was something more. The family's house stood at the edge of town, surrounded by dense woods. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away. It was the kind of place that felt cozy during the day, but transformed into something eerie when darkness fell. As Sarah paused on a rerun of an old sitcom, she heard it, a faint thud from upstairs. Her heart skipped a beat. Probably just the wind, she whispered to herself, trying to shake off the creeping fear. But the wind doesn't make footsteps. She muted the TV, straining to listen. Silence. Maybe she'd imagined it. She laughed nervously and reached for the remote to turn the volume back up. Thud, thud, thud. This time, there was no mistaking it. The sound was coming from the second floor. Sarah's hands went cold. She tried to convince herself that it could be anything. Maybe something had fallen in her parents' room, or the old house was settling. But deep down, she knew better. She stood up slowly, every muscle in her body tense. Clutching her phone tightly, she crept toward the staircase. The soft creak of the floorboards beneath her feet felt deafening in the silence. "Mom," she called out, even though she knew no one was supposed to be home. No answer. She took a shaky step onto the first stair, then another. As she climbed, she noticed how cold the air was. It wasn't just winter chill cold. It felt unnatural, like the warmth had been sucked out of the air. At the top of the stairs, she hesitated. Her parents' bedroom door was slightly ajar, and a thin sliver of darkness peered through the gap. Sarah's mind raced. Call the police? Call her parents? But what if it was nothing? She didn't want to overreact. Summoning every ounce of courage she had, she pushed the door open. The room was empty, but something felt off. The curtains fluttered slightly, even though the windows were closed. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on the closet door. It was shut tight, but something about it made her skin crawl. Then it happened. The handle turned, ever so slowly. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but her feet were frozen in place. The door creaked open a fraction of an inch, revealing nothing but darkness inside. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Silence. Then a shadow moved. She bolted. Racing down the stairs, she grabbed the landline phone in the kitchen and dialed 911, her fingers trembling. 911, what's your emergency? "Someone's in my house," she cried, her voice shaking with terror. "Please send someone fast." "Stay on the line, honey. Help is on the way." But as the operator spoke, the line crackled and the lights flickered before going out completely. The house was plunged into darkness. Panic gripped Sarah. She grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, its weak beam barely cutting through the inky blackness. "Stay calm," she told herself, trying to steady her breathing. She moved cautiously toward the front door, intending to wait outside for the police. But the door wouldn't budge. She tried the lock, then the deadbolt, but something was jamming it from the outside. She was trapped. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text message. "Unknown number. You can't leave. I'm already inside." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as dread washed over her. She spun around, shining the flashlight wildly into the darkness. The beam caught something in the corner of the room, a figure, standing completely still. Her scream caught in her throat as the figure began to move toward her, slow and deliberate. "Leave me alone," she shouted, backing away until she hit the wall. The figure stopped, just beyond the reach of her flashlight beam. It was tall, its face obscured by shadow. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, her voice trembling. No answer. Instead, the figure raised a hand and pointed upstairs. Sarah's mind reeled. Was there someone else up there? Was this some kind of twisted game? Before she could react, there was another sound, the distant wail of sirens. Relief flooded her. The police were close, but the figure didn't move. It stood perfectly still, watching her. Seconds felt like hours. Finally, red and blue lights flashed through the windows as the police arrived. Sarah ran to the window, waving frantically. When she turned back, the figure was gone. The police broke down the front door and rushed in, finding Sarah trembling in the corner. She tried to explain what had happened, but it all sounded so unreal. A shadowy figure, a mysterious text, footsteps upstairs. They searched the house thoroughly but found no sign of an intruder. No footprints, no unlocked windows, nothing. "Are you sure you weren't just imagining things, sweetheart?" one of the officers asked gently. Sarah wanted to argue, but even she began to doubt herself. Maybe it had been her imagination, fueled by too many horror movies. But as she climbed into bed that night, still shaken, she noticed something on her nightstand, a single black feather. Her blood ran cold. Whoever or whatever had been in her house was still out there, and they weren't finished with her yet. The next few days were a blur. Her parents, worried by her shaken demeanor, decided to stay home from work. They tried to comfort her, but Sarah felt like she was being watched, even in her own home. On the third night, it happened again. At exactly midnight, Sarah was jolted awake by a loud bang from downstairs. This time, she didn't hesitate. Grabbing her phone and the baseball bat she kept by her bed, she crept out of her room. The hallway was dark, but the faint glow of moonlight streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. As she descended the stairs, she could hear it, a faint whispering coming from the living room. She tightened her grip on the bat, her heart pounding in her chest. As she reached the bottom step, the whispering stopped. She flicked on the flashlight, sweeping the beam across the room. It landed on something that made her stomach drop, a message scrawled in red on the wall. "I'm not alone. Neither are you." Before she could react, a cold hand grabbed her shoulder.